for many businesses, adding marketing is an expense that doesn't have an immediate ROI. Adding a salesperson to be another door knocker that you're paying basically commission only doesn't really have an expense. So as the business owners that we meet with, they say, well, if I'm going to have to spend that on marketing, I don't know if it's going to work. I don't know if the sales thing's going to work either, especially the way you're describing it. And I kind of believe it. But you know what? I'll hire someone. We don't have to pay them. We just pay them commission. We'll see. We'll see if it works. That's reality. I mean, that is what happens.
Hey, everybody. I'm Mike Lieberman, CEO and Chief Revenue Scientist here at Square 2. Welcome to What's Wrong with Revenue, Season 3, Episode 2. We're going to talk about buyer journey models. And I continue the conversation with Matt Sunshine, CEO at the Center for Sales Strategy and Leads G2. In this show, Matt and I debate the new buyer journey model and how customers and specifically B2B CEOs should think about using them to help improve their results from both their sales and marketing. Matt has his approach and I have our approach. And I think both buyer journey model approaches are really eye-opening for CEOs and revenue leaders. Looking forward to the show. Let's shift gears a little bit. So I want to talk about modeling the new buyer journey because from our perspective, when we work with clients, you know, and I want to dig into this a little bit the way you talked about you do it with your clients. We come to the table with a better representation of the way people buy today, right? We call it the Cyclonic buyer journey. It is 8 stages, and actually the stages are small hurricanes because I feel like when you're buying something today, especially a larger B2B, high ticket average, long sales cycle, multi-person decision-making process, complex sale, that's typically who we work with, and I think you probably do too. Those people are in these small hurricanes. They're trying to make a decision, right? They're trying to make a good decision. They don't want to get fired. They don't want to hire the wrong person. They don't want to get in trouble. They don't want the spotlight shining on them. So they're trying to make a good, safe purchase decision. There's multiple people involved. They have information coming at them from all over. Especially like social today, like you mentioned something casually and all of a sudden you're getting sent, ads that related to what you might have mentioned casually while you were talking to a friend of yours, but I felt like the buyer journey today is very chaotic. So we depicted it with these series of cyclones, and the cyclones not only represent how hard it is to make a decision when you're trying to sift through all this stuff, but also the flow through the buyer journey is not linear, meaning you could have worked your way down to like stage 3 or 4 and get blown back into stage 1 because, oh, wow, there's this new company that does something crazy that we never heard of before. Like, oh, we have to include them. We have to start all over again. Like those kinds of things happen, right? So it's a cycle. It's not linear. It's the only thing controlling it really is the flow of information. And to manage it, marketing has to proactively try to control the movement of the buyer through those different stages, right? By understanding how they feel and providing them content in context to get them to feel more comfortable with you than with the other 3 companies they're talking to, right? And then when sales picks it up at the appropriate stage, like we talked about earlier, they have to do the same thing. They have to create a better experience than their competitors so that the prospect also feels like, wow, these guys from CSS, they really listened to me. They really provided me a lot of interesting information. I got to meet the owner. Matt was a nice guy. I felt comfortable with him. Like, all I talked to over here was this sales rep. So like I'm leaning towards this other, right? Because of the experience. So that's how Square 2 thinks about it. When we work with our clients, we're mapping their buyer journey in the context of those 8 stages. And you had a slightly different approach to it. So I'm curious if you use any kind of model or you're really kind of leaning on them to come back to you and tell you what their experiences has been to help you guys do a similar kind of exercise with them.
Yeah, so we actually rely on them. So we'll take them through a process where we'll talk about, so tell me about your typical customer, right? Where do they come from? What were the things that they were experiencing that caused that? What are the typical 3, 4, 5 things that they're experiencing in their business that leads them to say, you know what, I ought to start thinking differently? What are those things? And that's really important. That triggering event is really, really, because we can help. I mean, we can work with almost any client and help them to identify really good targets to go after. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about what are those triggering events that put someone in that mindset that I'm starting to rethink things. I mean, I need to really think. And then we say, okay, well, now that they're rethinking, what are the things that they need to know? Like if you're dealing with this issue, if a business is dealing with this issue, which is common for your customers, what is it that they want to know? Where do they currently go to get that information? What would they see as a significant resource for them? What do you hear them often refer to besides you? What do they refer to? Right. And we kind of walk them through. And for our approach being a little bit more, I mean, we, so you do this enough. We have a joke that people say, you don't understand my market. My market's different. My city's different. Right. And we always kind of laugh and we go, yeah, it is different, but there's a lot that's the same.
You know where I live, right? Like right outside Philadelphia. I once had a company tell me, we're in Delaware. You don't understand how people do business in Delaware. Yeah.
Right. I mean, and so there are a lot of but we have found that working with our customers and taking that extra time to go through one step at a time, to help them bring those hurricanes, using your word. I love that. By the way, I love your steps. I've looked at it a lot. Looking at what's going on at that time and what are those issues. And then that helps us to bring it to life. So, and we'll model a few examples for them to show them, we have a sample that we show people and say, okay, so here's typically what people are thinking about. They're having, like for CSS, they're having a really hard time finding good salespeople, right? That's a triggering event. Man, we can't find good, or you know what? Our salespeople don't get up and running as fast as possible. That's a big one. Or we have sales managers that have been recently promoted into sales leadership, and no one has ever shown them how to be a sales leader. They were great salespeople. These are the triggering events. So we usually use ourself because that's a good model and we know everything about it. My salespeople are frustrated because they don't have enough quality appointments. If I could get my salespeople out on more good quality appointments, man, we'd hit all of our numbers. So that's what makes someone starting to think about it. Doesn't mean that they're ready to talk to us. Just means they're starting to think about things. They're starting to think, am I organized the right way? I will tell you a big one that we get right now, like in the last 30 days, I bet we've had 3 or 4 prospects, old prospects of ours that we have not talked to in probably a year, reemerge because they've been starting to think, are they structured the right way? Do they have the right balance of sales, customer service, marketing in their operation? And they're reaching out to us. And one woman reached out earlier this week or last week and said, I know that we haven't talked, but I follow what you guys do. And I kind of wanted to know how you guys would go about helping in that area, right? So that's something that's a trigger. That's their journey.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that illustrates exactly what we're talking about, right? Like a year ago, you had a conversation with them, right? They've been on the journey prior to a year ago. Like, so whatever happened, even before that, their journey started. They've been on this journey for a whole nother year, right? In one stage or the other, could have been just flat out trying to educate themselves, stuck in that one cyclone, unable to move forward for whatever reason, and then something happens. It could have been a piece of content you sent them, right? It could have been something that you published,
Right.
could have been something that someone else published that made them think of you, that brought them back around to have a conversation with you. That's such a good example of how hard it is to understand the buyer journey, but how important it is to be continually trying to proactively engage with that prospect to get them through those stages, right? So that can tweak the pain when it's acute for them, right? Your example is so good. Their pain wasn't acute, so they weren't able to move forward. Now, for some reason, their pain is more acute and they want to talk to you and it's moving quite quickly, right? Again, that's a very common scenario, I think, for a lot of B2B companies. One that is, in my opinion, difficult for the people investing in marketing to understand. Like, like to your point earlier, oh, we cold called them 3 years ago. That's a cold call lead. No, actually, it's not. That cold call lead was dead until we sent them this email that referenced this piece of content that got them thinking differently about their issues, right?
So here, a thing that I do specifically is when I'm having this conversation with a prospect or even just another business owner that I meet through EO or a Vistage meeting or one of those things, and I'll say to them, all right, so give me an example of a triggering event, something that makes a prospect of yours need what you do. So we'll use my silly example. We'll use they're not sure if they're organized correctly, if they're structured correctly. So then I'll just say, okay, what content have you produced that speaks to that?
Right.
Show me where that lives. Is it a PDF that a salesperson uses to send in an email? Is it on your website? Have you done a podcast, a video cast? Have you purchased LinkedIn ads? Have you posted about it on social media? Whatever, I don't care. I mean, just and they're like, well, we really don't have anything like that. And that happens all the time. I said, well, why don't you? Well, we do when when we get that phone call and they say, well, then we create something. So
right.
You're waiting till after. I'm talking about being proactive.
Yeah, I mean, we do something similar. We ask sales reps to tell us what questions prospects are asking at different stages of the buyer journey, right? And those questions are the same things as your pain points, right?
Yes.
Have to be proactively answering their questions, especially when marketing is controlling 85% of that buyer journey. That means those people aren't even pushing those questions to sales. They have them. We have to answer them in the marketing through the content we're publishing, through our website, through the emails we're sending, through the stuff we're putting on social. If you can answer their questions, they will feel better about wanting to work with you and continuing that process.
Right. And what hasn't changed is people do business with they know, like, and trust.
That's right.
Right. That was the same 30 years ago, 40 years ago. It'll be the same in 30 years. If they know you, like you, and trust you.
Right. Right. And I don't know, you probably know this, but I went to an amazing workshop so many years ago and it has stuck with me to this date. The reason what you're saying is true is because the way the human brain works, the decision to buy is controlled by the same part of your brain that controls fight or flight, which means you have to be safe to say yes, which means you have to know, like, and trust someone to be safe enough to say yes to them. And a lot of that is an emotional decision-making process. It's not rational. Know, like, and trust is mostly about how do I feel about Matt and Matt's company, right? Because the rationalization part of it is, oh, I can afford it. His contract is reasonable. I'm going to work with John. John seemed okay to me. But I trust Matt. I like Matt. He's everything he's saying resonates with me. Those are emotional responses to your sales process.
Right.
And that's what gets people wanting to do business with you. Right. Very hard for people to understand that. I've had that. I've told that story so many times. I feel like when I tell it, they get it. But in practice, it's hard to get that to come out in your sales process, in your marketing, in your materials, in your story, in all the things you need to create that really compelling buyer journey experience.
Yeah. Well, and we have that in there. We can all pick our favorite brands out there, but we have our favorite brands that we know, like, and trust. And when we see things on the shelf, we gravitate to one because we know, like, and trust it. Like I've never had that product, but it's made by them. It must be good because I know them, I like them, I trust them. I'll buy it from them.
Yeah.
Matters.
And just to bring this full circle, then we'll move on to another topic here. Like, I feel like the B2C companies have ingrained that behavior in us.
Yes.
And much more part of the B2B buyer journey than it's ever been before, right? A lot of B2B companies say, that's B2C, that has nothing to do with me, right? They really would be making a mistake, because the Amazons and the Netflix and the Lululemons and these companies that have Nike, they've created these experiences for us that make us feel comfortable with them and their brand, and we trust them and we buy from them. And as consumers, we're looking for a similar experience and a similar feeling in our B2B purchases. And I think so many B2B companies don't recognize that, don't apply the same principles, and are really struggling to get their marketing and sales machine humming with those core concepts behind it.
I agree.